Hello there, Pursuing Freedom community. Thanks as always for tuning in. And if you are one of my repeat offenders, I appreciate you coming back time and again, and you won't regret being here today. And for anyone who's new to the show, buckle up. Welcome aboard. I've got my friend Sarah Weaver here, who I've been trying to track down for quite some time. But let me tell you what, where in the world is Sarah Weaver is one of the questions because this girl is a world traveler living a full-time nomadic life on her investments. And she's also a coach, and she owns a company called Invested Adventures, where she takes real estate investors on epic adventures all over the world. She's just back from Antarctica, Patagonia, Buenos Aires. I mean, I'll let her tell you the story, but she also wrote the book 30-Day Stay. She is the queen of the midterm rental. So when you hear us talk about MTRs, you've probably heard of STRs, which is short-term rentals. MTRs is midterm rentals, and Sarah is the queen of MTRs. So we're going to dig into that. And her mission is to build a life alongside the portfolio because she sees all these people doing the hustle and grind to build this real estate portfolio and this idea of having financial independence, but then they're not necessarily living the life. And so you can imagine, if you've been a follower of Pursuing Freedom for some time now, why I was so excited to get Sarah on the show today. So we'll dig into all the things that Sarah has to offer to help you on your journey. But as always, I like to inspire my listeners to think beyond the transaction. So yes, it's important to figure out how to find business and make consistent income. And yes, it's important to learn how to scale that business so you have some time freedom. But then what, right? What is the goal? Because we know it's not the easy route being self-employed. So with no further ado, I'm so excited to have you here, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Erin. I've always loved your motto, building a life that you don't need a vacation from, because sometimes I joke that like my Tuesday nights are better than some people's vacations. So I really like that.
You know, it's funny. There's a bumper sticker here in Winter Park, Colorado, and it's a little bit obnoxious, but I find it to be hilarious. And it just says, "My life is better than your vacation." And it's like, well, it's true some days, you know. I resisted the urge to be anxious with my overwhelming schedule today and just get to work, and instead went out and skied for an hour this morning with some girlfriends to prepare myself to show up energized to this. And I feel that every day when I'm out there playing in the snow or in the sunshine. So you get it though, Sarah. So give us a little backstory, Sarah. How did you get into what you're doing now? I imagine there was some predecessor to you taking this leap of faith, building your own portfolio, and now inspiring others to live this big life.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk to your audience specifically because I know we have a lot of real estate agents, so I can talk real estate agent lingo. So one of my very first jobs, I was actually a DOFI for Keller Williams, so Director of First Impressions, which is just a fancy way of saying I was the receptionist. And, and so then you would think, oh, and then I was inspired to be an agent. Nope, nope, nope. Like years went by. I went to college. I studied journalism and international studies because I wanted to be an international journalist. I taught English in South Korea. I had a travel job in Germany with an Australian owned Spain based travel company. So I really was like focused on travel in my early 20s. But I think that real estate's always been this whisper. My dad worked for a new home builder growing up. So I grew up, running through framed houses and playing on dirt piles, and through osmosis, just know a lot about how to build a house. And I always saw the real estate agents like driving the fancy cars, but then I noticed they're also working on a Saturday at the job site. And so, one thing that happened to me was when I came back to the United States after teaching English in South Korea, I knew I wanted a job where I made my own hours. And it's laughable now because any real estate agent knows your hours are dictated by your clients. So instead of having one boss, you have about 18 bosses or however many active leads you have in the pipeline. But I didn't know that then. And so I got my real estate license. I got my real estate license in Austin, Texas, with Keller Williams. And what's really cool about that Keller Williams office is that's actually where Joe Williams and Gary Keller office out of. And so little Sarah Weaver thought join Keller Williams, get a like have lunch with Joe and see Gary in the hallway. Turns out that was really special. And I just had access to really fantastic agents. And I was young at the time. I was 25. Is that right? Yep, I was 25. but I'm very observant. I think that my background in journalism and just being a naturally curious person. And one thing that I observed was the agents that were kind of flying in and out of the office. They weren't driving, the G Wagon. They were driving, don't get me wrong, they were driving a nice car. But then I started following them on Facebook or Instagram, and I'm like, man, they're going on really nice vacations. Or I see them at their kids' games or out on the lake on the weekends. And I'm like, okay, that's like what I want to know more about. While real estate agents love talking about GCI and units closed, I wanted to see, like, okay, but who's actually building wealth? And what I realized through asking really good questions is that a lot of these agents that were what I consider wealthy, not just rich, they owned rental property. And that wasn't the first time I had heard about rental property, but it really was for me kind of the nail in the coffin. Like, I am going to be a real estate investor. And so after a short stint as a real estate agent, I realized that there was two things I wanted to do in life. I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to buy rental properties. And so I knew that being an agent in Austin, the way that I was doing it at the time wasn't going to get me there. So I actually switched jobs and I took a recruiting position with a staffing agency that only places administrative staff with real estate agents and brokerages. So think about your transaction coordinator, your listing coordinator, your personal assistant, executive assistant, director of marketing, any like administrative staff at the brokerage level. This company specialized in placing them. What did that mean for me? I got to use my journalism skills, my gift of gab, and that boss didn't care where I lived. And so I said goodbye to Austin, packed up my bag, like closed my real estate sales business, and bought a one-way ticket to South America.
And how long did you stay there?
Um, on and off. So in 2016, I did 3 months, realized really quickly that that was it. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to live abroad and work Monday through Friday on my computer and be location independent or a digital nomad. And so as you guys can hear, I mean, this was way before COVID and the whole movement to working remotely. And so in 2019, that was like the first time that I said, okay, I'm really done. I am going to live in Argentina. And at this point in the story, I do own one rental property. So closed on my first rental property and like within a few months was moving to Argentina.
So talk us through this process. Where did you find your first rental property? And as you're living in Argentina, but being employed by an American, I'm assuming, based
Yes.
company, you're, I'm guessing, also able to be aggressive in your planning for buying investment properties because the cost of living is so significantly less while your salary is commensurate with US living.
Exactly. So I'll first touch on that. Absolutely. I was cash flowing from that rental $800 a month. That's above capital expenditures, setting money aside for maintenance, repairs, vacancy, property management. And I was still profiting in my pocket $800 a month. That paired with my salary, I was living in Argentina for like maybe $1,200 a month and living a good life, you guys. Sure, my accommodation wasn't the Ritz, but I was having massages, having dinners out every night, living really, really well on $1,200. And so, how did I find that first property? It's actually fantastic. I used the skills that I gathered as a real estate agent doing door knocking and talking to strangers and, creating true connections with people. And I did what we call in real estate investing called driving for dollars. So I knew that there was a specific neighborhood in Prairie Village, Kansas. It's about half an hour from where I grew up, and it is just an A-class neighborhood at a price point that makes sense. And these, when you list these houses for rent, they rent right away because 20 somethings want to live there, 30 somethings want to live there, 40 somethings want to live there. People want to live in this town. And so I also saw a trend that people were picking up these 1942 Cape Cods, and they were tearing them down and building these like mini mansions. So you could purchase one in the 200s, maybe 250, 275. But then once you were building these, what I consider like mini mansions, they were getting listed for 750, 800. And that was 5 years ago. Aaron, last I checked, which was about 4 months ago, the house two doors down that was a tear down and a new build, it sold for 1.3 million.
Yeah, so our stories are similar in the sense that you were in Argentina. Well, I think I'm a bit older than you, but in my early years, it was Barcelona for 2 years, and my tourist visa would expire every 3 months, and I had to go to a different country and get my passport stamped so I could look like I was on the go. I mean, I was on the go to an extent, but I did have an apartment there in Barcelona. And when I got back, when I fell into the real estate space, I chose the mortgage profession over real estate agent because I wanted the location independence. So I have a couple questions around this. First of all, some people listening to stories like that of how we, I know you still live this life, but how I once lived this nomadic lifestyle, living, like a vagabond and living on buttered noodles. I did not live well, I wouldn't say, but I lived on buttered noodles and it was worth it. Um, but sometimes I think when people are listening, they might think to themselves, well, I wish I had done that when I was young.
Yeah.
So nowadays, you're teaching people, and I have more questions about the journey from the beginning to where you are now, teaching others. But my one of my first questions before we even go that far, and so we don't tune people out immediately, is like, how do you help people that feel like it's too late for them? Either because the cost of living is extraordinarily different than when I started buying real estate in
Yeah.
'08 and you in 2016 and so on.
Well, I think the first thing everyone should hear is that I'm not selling that you should sell your husband, sell your kids, and put on a backpack. I think that that's not the reality for a lot of people. And it's not really what I want to be doing, in 2 to 3 years either. I'll just be fully transparent. I'm 34 years old and I left in 2019 when I was 29 thinking, oh, I'm surely that I'll be back by Christmas. So left in January 2019, thinking that by Christmas 2019, I would come back to the US. I'd probably buy another rental property, fire up a dating app and live a normal life. Um, to my shock, that was 5 years ago. And I just keep doing what I'm doing. But along the way, I have picked up rental property. I now own 19 units. It is a single family, two fourplexes, and whatever that is, 5 duplexes. And so they're just small multifamily. So I say I buy boring buildings in boring markets. The average price of my property is like 220,000, and they all cash flow anywhere between 400 and $1,000. And so able to bring in 14,000, about 10,000 to $14,000 a month of cash flow. That's pure profit. I may be crazy and travel the world by myself and skydive and, do a polar plunge in Antarctica. But when it comes to investing, I'm incredibly conservative because I don't come from money. My mom cleans houses. My dad works for a Windows company. I don't have a backup plan. I don't have a spouse that can, pay the bills in case things are going slow. And so when I invest in real estate, I invest really conservatively. So I'm buying a duplex in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm turning one side of it into a long-term rental so that I can, sleep well at night. And then I turn the other side into a furnished rental, which you touched on. I wrote the book on the medium term or the midterm rental strategy. So it's a furnished rental, just like your typical Airbnb, but my guests stay for 30 days or more. And so what's great about this is in 2023, my average stay for an MTR was 87 nights. That means that I have 2, maybe 4 tenants a year or guests checking in and out. So I can still continue to live this lifestyle. And so I say all of that so that your audience can hear, you guys can do this. You can buy a duplex or a single family in a place that you don't live. I bought in Des Moines. I'd never been to Des Moines, Iowa, ever. And you can buy properties in places that you don't live. And even with the price that the market's at now and interest rates where they're at now, you can buy something. Your tenants are paying down your principal. You're building equity because you're forcing appreciation as time goes on. And then you are also collecting cash flow if you're using the midterm rental strategy because a midterm rental can get 2 to 2.5 times the rent as a long term. And so all of this is possible for anyone listening, whether you have a lot of money and you don't know what to do with it. And frankly, you people with a lot of money, you need the tax benefits. Or maybe you're over here and you're like, I'm doing okay, but everything still feels really tight. Trust me, like take a step back and look at adding a rental property to your portfolio, because what happens is over time, it becomes life-changing money. That first rental that I bought, that wasn't, I mean, sure, $800 when I was making so little, sure, that was life-changing money. But for any of your listeners, that are bringing home 10 to 20,000 a month, $800 is not life-changing money. But if you do that 15, 20 times, pair it with using cost segregation and accelerated depreciation, and just the fact that you're paying down principals and building equity, and then you can later even pull that equity out, use that equity to buy more real estate. I mean, you guys, this is life-changing stuff. And then if you want to go on a nice vacation to Hawaii or go to Barcelona with your girlfriends, you can do that. But I don't think that everyone should be backpacking the world and, trying to buy real estate at hyperspeed. I think your listeners should buy 1 to 2 rental properties a year for the next 5 years, and they'd be set for life.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. My husband was able to retire from his job in property management in 2016 when we moved to the mountains because of the rental properties. And then later we started buying out of state, and that also catapulted both the equity play that was possible, appreciation, because being in Colorado, where a lot of my listeners are also located, there has been such rapid appreciation over such a short amount of time that it's almost necessary to look out of state or at least out of county if you want to find those opportunities. So talk us through the logistics of buying. It's funny because we bought our first out of state place in Tennessee, and I remember going to the property, and I'm flying to Knoxville, and I said to somebody, I'm flying to a place, to a property I already own in a state I've never been. So like, talk us through your process mentally and logistically. What did that look like? How did you even start the process? And then how did it unfold from there?
Yeah, so real estate agents, I mean, listen up. I used real estate agents. So that very first deal, yes, I did driving for dollars. I door knocked. I found a FSBO, a for sale by owner. But after that, I realized I don't want to be doing that. That is not how I want to spend my Saturdays. And so I really relied heavily on investor friendly agents. So my next deal was a duplex. An agent found it. He knew exactly what I was looking for because I gave him my, crystal clear deal criteria, and he sent me a text that was like, you must buy this. And then he sent me the link and he sent me his analysis. And I said, yeah, write an offer. Like it was a no brainer. I ran the numbers backwards and forwards, and I wrote an offer. Then from there, my next deals were in towns that I had never been in. I then moved from focusing on Kansas City, and was looking in Omaha, Nebraska and Des Moines, Iowa. Meanwhile, I was living in New Zealand. So, I mean, I don't think I could have gotten further away unless maybe I went to Antarctica. And I was meeting agents via Facebook, building relationships with them. Actually, it's funny. I actually texted my Omaha agent today. And I mean, I bought a property from him almost 3 years ago. So we're still in constant contact. I send them a lot of business, but these agents knew exactly what I was looking for, and they knew that I was serious. And so I think that's the issue with a lot of investors, is that they get very like looky loo, like, oh yeah, I'd love to own something in Knoxville because Aaron does. That sounds great. But then they're not pre-approved, they're not actually ready or actually educated. And so I think that that's the part that I need to mention, is that real estate investing became my part-time job from like the get-go. I read all the books, listened to all the podcasts, but unlike a lot of investors that do both of those two things, I then took massive action. So I ended up actually switching jobs from that staffing agency and worked for a real estate investing company, because I believe you can earn while you learn, and it's one of the best things you can do. It's also really nice when your boss continues to let you live anywhere in the world. So I took that job. And so every single day was analyzing deals, learning about financing, learning about growth. And so now, I mean, I really feel like I have my master's in real estate investing because that's what I talked about on the weekends with my friends. Like, this is what I got really, really into. I've already told you guys, like, I have a degree in journalism and international studies. So while I may be, very inquisitive and good at asking questions, math is not like where I thrive. But I joke that I love money. So I learned how to get really good at math. And I can analyze any type of deal. I can analyze big, 197 unit apartment complexes to a single family home in Oklahoma. And I think as I've honed those skills, that's what gave me confidence in, oh my God, I'm going to buy a house in a place that I've never been with like a guy that I met off the internet. Like, is this a bad idea? But in jokes aside, I had done so much research and I had built a community. There was a few investors where I could, send them my inspection report and be like, "Hey, am I crazy? I think I should look at this, this, and this. What do you think?" And then I just really took ownership of my decisions. And next thing I knew, I built a pretty sizable portfolio for a single 30 something.
Awesome. So you touched upon something that I'm curious about as well, as it relates to the people that you work with in coaching, is you talk about how you invested a lot of your time and energy and effort into becoming this, having your master's level education in real estate investing, as well as this became a part-time job and in some regards, even two full-time jobs. So what is your advice on the transition, number one, from actively being the owner operator of buying properties and then managing those properties from wherever you live versus getting the property manager in place, which makes it a little bit more passive versus going true passive where you invest with maybe somebody else who's building a portfolio and you can get some returns and a fraction of that appreciation, but not have the time commitment that it takes to become the master's level investor.
Absolutely. I think that everyone needs to decide what are their goals. So if you're listening to this and your goal is to replace your income or your spouse's income fast, then you need to focus on cash flow. And so there's certain things that will cash flow more than others. Furnished rentals, buying a lot of property. So how fast can you scale? Maybe it's bringing in partners, even though you're giving away or, going to give them some of the cash flow. That's how you can scale really quickly. I think that is really important. But if you're trying to, shelter wealth and have tax benefits, but you're already maybe crushing it as a mortgage broker, working 50 hours a week, and you're like, if I add another job right now, like self-managing, even an MTR, my wife is going to leave me. Well, then don't do that. Then look at something like syndications or being a private money lender or being the silent partner or the equity partner in a deal. And so it's too difficult to, mass give advice for your audience.
Right.
But I think what everybody needs to do is really think seriously about what their goal is. And then also realize that we can't have it all, right? I can't buy a single family, burr a property, do a flip and a syndication and own an Airbnb and be a private lender all at the same time. But it's really cool. Everything that I just said, I've done all of that. So you can do it all. You just can't do it all at the same time. And so I think figuring out the order of operations is really important. That's why I love working with a mortgage broker that gets real estate investing because he sat down with me and he's like, okay, he's like, if you've already told me that you want to quit your job, which you shouldn't have told me, but now that I know that, then we should do it in this order. And like you're gonna get to a place where you're not lendable if you do X, Y, and Z, and so here's how I would lay this out for you. Same thing with, an experienced real estate investor is they're like, okay, if you only have 50,000, which first of all, applaud anyone that does have 50,000 that's willing to invest, then it might make sense to figure out how can I turn that 50,000 into more money faster. It might not be setting it aside in a syndication yet. Whereas that's something that I feel like I've kind of graduated up to, and now that's what I'm focused on doing.
And do you still self-manage your properties or do you outsource that?
I do. I self-manage 17 of the 19 units. And I have an incredible assistant. She is a virtual assistant in the Philippines. And between her and I, we self-manage all 17 units.
Awesome. Well, all of this advice has been amazing. And I want to honor your time here as we're coming up on the top of the hour, but I do want to hear a little bit about Invested Adventures because we've touched upon the book 30 Day Stay. We've touched upon your mentorship program and everything else. And obviously, the listeners are probably feeling inspired to learn more. If they're curious, I would love to know about Invested Adventures. Share with us how did that unfold, a couple of the trips you've taken, and what's on the horizon for that organization.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, Invested Adventures. It was so fun at a conference one time. A girl said, "Oh my God, that's like a dream job." And I said, "Yeah, it's my dream job." So my company, we bring together about 15, maybe 17 investors on a retreat. Sometimes the retreat is in a 17-bedroom mansion in Nashville, and it's really focused on kind of the inner work and goal setting, and everyone leaves that with a proven strategy of, okay, this is what Erin should do with her portfolio, this is what Scott should do with his portfolio. So those are a little bit different than some of my adventure trips, but one thing I want to say is that these are elevated experiences. So for Nashville, we're bringing in a musician, we're having a private concert, we're having masseuses come in and doing massages at the house, we're having a chef. So these are really like an elevated experience, because I think that a lot of us pursuing financial independence through real estate investing, we're just a little bit stressed out. And so my goal is to like lower some people's stress level, work on some of the limiting beliefs that I think are holding people back from having their dream life, and then having a ton of fun while doing it. Like no one comes to my events and doesn't like leave at least crying from laughter one time, because life is hard and I think we should all have a little bit more fun. So that's the more investor retreats. But speaking of fun, we also do really fun things. Like I took 12 investors to the south of Italy. That was the first trip where we actually did look at property in another country. Whereas I took 12 investors on African safari. So we did not look at property, but we looked at everything amazing that there is to offer in the Serengeti. Then 11 brave people hiked Kilimanjaro with us afterward, which is the tallest mountain in Africa. And we're doing all of this alongside real estate investors. So first, it's a tax write-off. This is a business trip. I don't know about you, but I think that's like the coolest way to have a business trip. And then also we can't help ourselves. So even though for Safari, we're not sitting down, in a conference room, talking about our goals, we can't help ourselves. Like this is what we love. And so we are talking about our goals and, oh, hey, how did you raise money for that boutique hotel? Or, hey, how did you raise $1 million on Instagram? Or, hey, I heard you did 30 flips last year. How did you do that and your life not fall apart? So we're having these conversations in the vehicle as we drive into the Serengeti. And then every night at dinner, as the wine pours, we're asking these questions, because how often do you get put at a table with 12 other people that love what you do, or like think as big and dream as big as you do? And so that's really why I do what I do, is that Invested Ventures, people leave there and they buy more property. Sure, I think that's important, but they create more cash flow, which creates more freedom. And so they're better husbands, they're better mothers, they're better friends. I really believe that the experiences that they're having on invested venture trips are life-changing.
I couldn't agree more. And every time I have someone on the show that shares their journey of the path to financial independence through whether it's real estate investing or passive investing or whatever it might be, I always share as a takeaway is that, don't just leave here inspired if you're listening to dream of someday having a life like Sarah's. Like, don't be an inspiration junkie, be an action junkie and actually get in the trenches and start taking action. And secondly, that your story becomes the inspiration for your clients. It elevates you as an authority to your clients who are watching what you're doing and how you're playing the game of life and the game of real estate. And they are going to see you as an expert and come to you saying, I want to know more about how you're doing it. And that's really what I want for you, is not just to build the life for yourself, but to pass that baton to those who need you to lead them through the journey. And that's really the responsibility of all of us as real estate professionals, is not just build our own path to financial freedom, but then help more people do the same, because everyone deserves it and everyone is worthy of it. And it's possible. I'm repeating myself, worthy, deserving, they all mean the same thing, but you get the idea. So yeah, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. And how can folks find you, follow you, get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, everything online is Sarah D. Weaver. So if they prefer LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, it's all Sarah D. Weaver, and my website, sarahdweaver.com. Erin, I would love to hear from your audience because if they're following you, then they're likely my people. And so I really hope that if you're listening to this and I've said anything that inspired you or made you scratch your head, I hope you reach out.
I hope so too. And if you are enjoying this content, make sure you find that place to leave a 5-star review because it helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Sarah and help more people on their journey to building a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. See you next time.